Yeah, we have this energy equation completely wrong on this planet. 59% of all life lives in the soil, lives in the ground. And that biodiversity, there is no other location on Earth that has more biodiversity than our soils. Yeah, it's quite interesting. These organisms, this plethora of diversity that lives inside our soil, it has the ability to replenish itself. It has the ability to reestablish colonies. It has this ability to understand when there's resources available, when there's food available. These organisms that live in our soil are incredibly powerful. If you compared it to the oceans, let's say you don't catch herring for 5 years, the oceans have this ability to heal themselves, and soils are no different. So all humans have to do is provide that energy for the soils. Leave the fish alone. It's not hard. We just have to basically work towards a setup where these organisms understand that there's a continuous source of energy, food available to them. So the story goes like this. If we want to heal this planet, if we want to have a great garden, we have to pay a lot more attention to the life that lives in the soil. We have to feed it a lot better. We have to take care of that life a lot better. We have to promote that diversity in the soil. It has been neglected. And why? Why have we neglected this ongoing energy that is in our soil? The reason is it's out of sight. We don't care about it because it's not a jaguar running in a forest, or it's not a lion in the savannah, not a giraffe eating off of tall trees. You can't see all this life in the soil. So that's been one of the big causes of this soil degradation in our own gardens, in our neighborhoods, in the bigger areas of the world. If we pay attention to the soils, it's going to make a really big difference in terms of how we can restore this planet. For the individual gardener, there's an energy equation. And the energy equation is energy in equals energy out. And there's many factors: covering the ground with vegetation, having a constant supply of compost, growing green matter. I don't use fertilizer, so I can't mention that. So there's all these things we can do to improve our soil. Making the soil consistency better, having the 3 components that make up great soil. Adding peat moss, adding clay, adding whatever these ingredients that are missing in our soils. That makes a huge difference if we can get that to work out correctly. Yeah, so what do you do if your garden doesn't look good? What do you do if your garden is getting tired? What do you do if your soils are getting depleted? How do you deal with all those things as a gardener that's trying to learn the trade? How do you keep everything healthy? The real equation is there's certain things that go on in the garden that you have to always pay attention to as a gardener. This idea of soil becoming tired is really the gardener's fault. The gardener didn't pay attention to what's going on. Too many crops went through the soil. Not enough material has been replaced to get that cycle going again. You've probably had a lot of the organisms that are in your soil. They've starved to death. So that equation of keeping everything alive, we have to look at it a little bit different, because we're dealing with living matter that's under the ground. So, for example, I've had some red wigglers here. I fed them, and I missed a scheduled feed. I didn't feed them on time, and they either wandered off or they died off. And that's similar to the rest of the rest of the entities that live in our soil. They need to be fed. They need to be constantly looked after in such a way that they don't die. So biodiversity, having many different plants helps, covering the ground helps, having enough water, keeping your soils moist enough, because these organisms in the soil, they need moisture, they need oxygen, keeping your soil aerated enough. There's so many things we can do as gardeners to keep our soils healthy. Every single gardener has a starting point. And what that starting point is related to is usually their soils. We had really poor soil here. We had really poor soil depth. We had to grow lots of green matter to create more soil. So there's this motion towards understanding what your deficiencies are. What does your garden lack? What is missing? What can you do as the gardener to improve your soil, to improve the way your plants grow? What can you do in such a fashion that you have a beautiful garden that is almost perpetual? It's working. It's keeping the life in the soil alive. It's keeping the plants with a forward movement. They're growing like crazy. How do we do that? It really boils down to you paying attention to the visuals. What is your garden telling you? Is your garden in trouble? Are there plants that are really struggling? Is everything doing really well? So there's this visual platform that your garden is giving back to you as a mirror of your efforts. Now, what happens a lot of times is we grow these great gardens and they get tired. Something happens, something is missing, something is overused. We have to prevent that from happening in the first place, and that's probably the hardest element of gardening, is preventing that downward spiral by not adding compost to the beds, not adding green matter to the beds, not covering the soil, not having enough diversity in the garden. A lot of times vegetable gardeners or people that grow food, they have the best visual indication. They have insects showing up, disease showing up, because the plants aren't healthy. The crops are really poor because the soil is so misused, mismanaged. So there's all these elements of this energy equation of our soils. This energy equation is more a matter of paying attention to what is going on in your garden. It's not easy. I'm incredibly worried that I'm going to run out of energy here, and there's not a lot I can do about it because everything is growing so fast and so profusely. That can't go on forever. I got to really pay attention to this garden, how it's slowly on its way to get tired. So when you're in your garden, think of that 59% of life that's under the ground. Feed it, water it, make sure that the air gets to them, make sure that they are working together with your plants. Make sure you look after the life that's invisible under the ground.